Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to our session. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can streamline your SAP-centric business processes using API-driven automation. And specifically, we're going to be talking about how you can simplify those complex data-intensive SAP processes using automation and specifically enhancing it with API automation. I'm Andrew Hayden. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager for our Automate products here at Precisely, and I will be your host today. A couple of quick things before we get started. Just want to let you know, for those of you in the SAP world going, who is this Precisely team? You're probably familiar with Windshuttle. And as Windshuttle, we've been automating SAP processes for a little over 20 years. So we are very, very familiar with SAP processes, and the importance of automating SAP processes. In 2021, Windshuttle was acquired by Precisely. So we are now part of the world's largest data integrity provider and network. I'll talk to you a little bit more towards the end or at the end about Precisely and what we do, but just know as we walk through it, for those of you familiar with Windshuttle, everything you hear should be very familiar to you with regards to our products around Evolve and Studio. So when you hear Precisely and you're talking about SAP automation, just think of Windshuttle. All right, so let's get started and let's talk a little bit more about API automation. So specifically today, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about automation and digital transformation. What is the relationship between those two, and kind of why has automation come to the forefront of digital transformation recently? We're going to talk about the Automate platform and specifically the Automate APIs. And that's really going to be the focus of our talk today, is around the three REST APIs that we offer through the Automate Evolve and Automate Studio Manager platforms. I'm going to walk through some of the ways you can apply those and what are some example use cases that we see and we get a lot of demand for. I'm going to talk through some key takeaways, and then I'll talk to you a little bit more, as I mentioned a moment ago, about Precisely who we are, what we do in the broader sense of things when it comes to data integrity. All right, so automation and digital transformation. If you think about what happened in 2020 with the pandemic, we were going along pretty well with our digital transformation efforts. And all of a sudden, we discovered when the pandemic hit what the limitation of those digital transformation efforts were. Suddenly, our businesses were completely disrupted. We had to be able to move. We had to be able to change. And our digital transformation efforts, which had often been around data and data structures, digitalizing, all that kind of stuff, was inadequate to address the kind of disruptions that we faced in 2020 and subsequently since then. So when we talk about automation and digital transformation, this is one of the key reasons that automation has now really become that next stage in your digital transformation journey. And looking more at the numbers, we're investing a massive amount of money in automation itself. We have been for a number of years, and that's just accelerated. So Gartner estimates that by 2026, we will have spent over $1 trillion on automation. So again, we're investing massive amounts into it. And when we look what KPMG found coming out of the pandemic, they found that about 80% of CEOs are accelerating their digital transformation efforts. And a core area of this is in the automation space. Because again, we found out what the limitations of our efforts up until now were in 2020. So now we need to catch up and be able to adjust as quickly as we possibly can. In that same survey, which was their global CEO outlook, they found that about 2/3 of CEOs are looking to spend more money on technology than people. But they're not looking for technologies that are going to replace people. That was kind of the original, I guess you can call it, automation trope around, automation was an FTE replacement. Well, it's not anymore. Labor markets are very tight. We've learned kind of what the contributions of automation are to our organizations. And so now what CEOs are looking for is they're looking for technologies that are going to make their current people more efficient and more effective. Again, we're not looking to replace people. We're looking to make our current teams better. Labor markets are tough. It's hard to hire people. So how do we make them better and keep them happy doing it? And also in that same time frame, ASUG went out and they surveyed SAP-run companies. And what they found was that only about 45% of them, so less than half, are actually leveraging automation in a meaningful way. So there's a lot of room here to grow, especially in the SAP space. And so as we go through the presentation today and you think about those core complex data-intensive SAP processes that you're faced with, and you're looking at how automation can help drive benefits across them, we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I will tell you that we have lots of information at precisely.com, other webinars, demonstrations of exactly what we can do to help you drive efficiencies through your SAP specific and SAP centric processes, the ones that are really focused within SAP. What we're going to talk about today is how you can take advantage of automation that involves SAP and other systems of record. And so that's where the APIs come in. Now, one of the things we also learned coming out of the pandemic was that core set of needs that our customers have in terms of their digital transformation efforts and how automation fits with them. And interestingly enough, they didn't change that much over time, but the context in which companies look at them has changed significantly. So the number one thing we find is that companies want to be more agile. And it used to be that being more agile was a competitive advantage. It's how do I gain a competitive advantage over my competitors, if you will. Now, what we're finding is being more agile is not just about the competitive advantage, but it's being able to respond to disruptions and to these sudden changes in the marketplace. Automation is a really, really critical way to be able to address that need. So we understand that, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. There's the need to go faster. We've always had this need to go faster as we collect more data, as we see more and more of our business environment speed up. There's a great quote from Justin Trudeau, who's the Prime Minister of Canada, and he said it several years ago, which is, the pace of change has never been this fast, but it will never be this slow again. I don't recommend thinking about that too much. It will make your head hurt, but it's never been more true. If you think about the pace of change and the pace of business and how fast it's going, it's constantly accelerating. And being able to keep up with that in a very traditional business manner simply isn't going to work. So automation, again, is a really great way to keep up with that pace of change and to go faster as the business world goes faster. And then the third need is this need to improve the quality and integrity of your most important data. And for all of us here, the most important data we're talking about is your SAP data. It's the data that lives within your SAP systems. So if you think about digital transformation and data, the HFS said it very well. HFS is an analyst firm out of the UK that specializes in looking at automation. And what they said is, technology is a means to an end. Data is the currency of digital transformation. And I think for a very long time, this was absolutely true. However, I would argue that this is incomplete, especially for those of us who work in the SAP world. Because SAP forces you to create and manage data through very specific processes. So as a result, what you have is this interdependence of process and data. You can't look at a process improvement initiative without looking at the data that process creates and manages. Because if that process creates and manages bad data and you improve it, what you end up doing is creating a lot of bad data very quickly. And that's counterintuitive and just increases your business risk. Same thing on the data quality side. If you're going to do a data quality initiative, you're going to clean up the data you have, you really need to look at the processes that are creating and managing that data. Otherwise, you're just going to continuously be doing data improvement or data quality improvements. And one of the key things to think about, and this, I work for Precisely, we make some of the best data quality tools in the world. We are happy to sell them to you to help clean up the data you currently have. But on the automation side, it's one of those things that can help clean up that initial data quality significantly. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. And again, the other resources that we have available to you are really going to very clearly talk about that as well. So you can't separate process and data, especially around these SAP processes and around the SAP data we're going to talk about. Keep that in mind as we walk through this presentation today. Now, diving in a little more specifically, as we talk about the elements of digital transformation, you think about everything that we work with in digital transformation, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of these today. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, we're going to touch on, but business networks and cross-company collaboration. This is one of those core areas where automation can really help drive benefits and drive efficiencies. User experience, again, using forms that are going to clean up and really give business users a much better way of working with data and creating and managing data than an SAP interface is going to do. Self-service, we're not really going to touch on today, but it's an important thing to look at. Again, we talk about it in other things. Digitalization, all those things. That's what all of this is about. Process intelligence, understanding what's going on throughout your processes. So how do you track those processes very well? Automation is a core way to do that. Moving things into the cloud. Very important as well, as our IT organizations get leaner and leaner and leaner, and we move more towards looking at the cloud as a way to simplify our IT infrastructure and IT organizations. And then finally, thinking about end-to-end process integration. And this really is where APIs come into the story and how they're really going to help drive your automation and digital transformation success. So that's going to be the core of what we're going to talk about today, is that end-to-end process integration. And how do you integrate other systems and other systems of record with SAP in your SAP processes? So for our discussion today, where are we going to start? Well, we're going to start and center everything around the Precisely Automate portfolio. And that portfolio, for anyone who is familiar with Windshuttle, should look very familiar to you, which is we're going to start with Automate Evolve, which is our workflow and process automation engine and platform, as well as Automate Studio and Automate Studio Manager. And for the API discussion, we're really just looking at Evolve, and we're looking at Automate Studio Manager, which is the server, has a lot of server-side capabilities for Automate Studio, which is our mass data management product. And so think about these two as you look at it. So one is for workflow, which is Automate Evolve, and the other one is for straight through processes that don't require data enhancement and data enrichment. So now let's talk about API connectivity. And if you're not familiar with APIs, API stands for Application Programming Interface. So it's a very small piece of software that enables disparate systems and different systems to talk to each other and transfer data seamlessly. And it is a very, very powerful way of automating and managing your data between systems. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about what we have to offer around API connectivity. Today, we're going to talk about the RESTful APIs that we recently introduced for the Evolve and Automate Studio Manager products. And what these help you do is manage and automate a broader end-to-end processes by connecting multiple systems and cloud services with SAP. These APIs help solution developers efficiently integrate systems and processes to eliminate manual data management that often leads to poor data quality and ungoverned process tracking. These RESTful APIs help solution developers efficiently integrate systems and processes to eliminate manual data management, often leading to poor data quality and ungoverned process tracking. For teams creating seamless end-to-end solutions, Evolve and Studio Manager automate business processes that require complex SAP data interactions with other third-party systems like Salesforce, or that use OData protocol. Traditionally, processes like these have required inflexible custom solutions that do not easily adjust to dynamic business environments. The specific set of RESTful APIs that we recently introduced really are these three. You've got the SAP Data API, which is for moving data directly into SAP, and it takes advantage of our 20 plus years of automating SAP processes, really for helping you manage that last mile into SAP, if you think of it that way, because often coordinating and automating data into SAP can be a very difficult process. Our second one is the Digital Access API for kicking off workflows from a third party outside. And then our third-party API support. Now, I'm going to talk about all of these in more detail. So let's talk a little bit more about the SAP Data API. All right, so we're going to start with the SAP Data API. And this is a RESTful API that enables direct integration with SAP for scenarios that don't require enrichment. So the data doesn't need to be enhanced in any way. It accesses the last mile into SAP for other applications and eliminates the need for RPA bots to screen scrape the UI to deliver faster, more stable process automation. The SAP Data API enables direct and differentiated integration via the Precisely function module with SAP ERP systems for loading data into SAP and has scalable runtime performance. It is a really great way if you need to get data into SAP in the most efficient manner possible. All right, so what does this look like in practice? Well, if you think about the SAP Data API and how we just described it, it's really great for moving data from applications to SAP that don't require workflow. So these can be applications where the application has some activity that happens in it, and that data that is created or managed in that other application needs to get into SAP. So it's going to call the SAP Data API through Studio Manager or Evolve, and then you've got direct integration into SAP. Again, perfect for those last mile applications. Another one that we see, and I know I mentioned earlier that it replaces RPA bots, but here's one area where RPA bots can be really, really useful in conjunction with the data, the SAP Data API. And that is where you've got RPA bots that are gathering and collecting information from a system of record or different parts of a system of record or multiple systems of record. And all of that data needs to get combined and coordinated and then applied into or not applied into SAP, posted into SAP. And again, the RPA bot then can call the SAP data API for posting that data into your SAP ERP system. So it's a really efficient way to use us with an RPA bot. We've seen a number of customers do this, and they've had great results being able to do this because, again, the RPA bot does what it does best, which is gather data from multiple sources and then call us, and we do what we do best, which is being able to post that data into SAP directly. So again, it's using us as that last mile into SAP. So that was just a quick view of the SAP Data API. It's pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. And those are really the use cases we've seen from our customers. Now, the next one is the Digital Access API. And this one's a little bit more powerful in many ways when you've got those complex data-intensive processes that require workflow and require data from other systems or other systems to kick off a workflow for data that's going to end up in SAP. So the Evolve Digital Access API is the RESTful API that enables external processes to kickstart or update an Evolve workflow for users to contribute data before it is ultimately posted to SAP. One of the key things we know people really appreciate about Evolve is that it's great for creating and managing data and being able to do all of that data review and data approval before it gets posted to SAP. So you don't have to work inside SAP and look at the processes and make any corrections there. It all happens within Evolve before it gets posted to SAP. And again, when you're dealing with data coming from other systems of record, whether it's Salesforce or PLM or ServiceNow, or you name any number of sources where you need to kick off a workflow, the Evolve Digital Access API is perfect for that. So some examples of how this works: if you've got your CRM system and say somebody is doing an account create in your CRM system, they may type in that initial data into Salesforce. And once that data gets into your initial data gets into Salesforce for starting the account creation process for a new customer, that Salesforce process calls the Digital Access API and then kicks off a more complex and more comprehensive process for actually creating that process in SAP. Because we know often account creation processes aren't just one part of your company. They often involve other areas. It can be finance. If you think about a vendor create, you're talking about materials, and you're talking about master data, and you're talking about your logistics team and everything like that. Same on the customer side, where it can be not only your CRM system, but it's your finance department, and it might be your shipping and everything else. So the workflow that can get kicked off within Evolve involves all of those other teams, and any data that needs to get enhanced or by them, collected from those teams, reviewed by those teams. And within that workflow, you can validate that data against SAP before posting. So you can do lots of different things to make sure that that data is of the absolute highest quality before it gets posted into SAP. So once your final approval is received and you hit that post, your account gets created in SAP automatically. But that initial process was kicked off within your CRM system. So a lot of efficiencies there with the Digital Access API. Another example of a process would be something like invoice processing, where you're going to receive that invoice as a PDF or an email, and it's going to go through something like Abby, which is going to take that unstructured data and it's going to turn it into structured data. And then Abby is going to call the Digital Access API and again, start that workflow process. So anything that needs to happen with that invoice in terms of reviews, data additions, data enrichment or enhancement can go through. Within that process, you can open that original PDF, you can do the compare, and then you can attach it to the record. You can do the data validation again, as I talked about earlier. And once that final approval is received, that invoice automatically gets posted into SAP for payment, as well as having that original PDF attached to it. So again, you're driving a lot of efficiencies into a complex process that has workflow involved with it. And it's starting somewhere outside of Evolve. It's starting somewhere outside of your SAP system. It's starting in another system, but it's automated throughout. And I think one of the core things to realize about the Digital Access API is these are processes that are human in the loop. And human in the loop processes are often very difficult to automate because, let's face it, we are complex and finicky and unpredictable. But being able to do it in this governed, regular, automated manner that we have with Evolve drives great efficiencies into your organization. And then another interesting one we've had a customer do, and this is for cost center creation within SAP. So this thing happens all within SAP, except they're using Evolve because they want business users to be able to review and approve the information around those cost centers, but they don't want to do it in the SAP interface. They don't want to do it in the SAP GUI or in Fiori. Honestly, I'm not sure which one it is. We've got a couple of customers doing this. So what this does is within SAP, they're creating that cost center. And once that cost center gets created, it kicks off that workflow process that in a business-friendly form alerts those business users that they have data to review or enhance. And once that final approval is received, it automatically posts that cost center right back into SAP. So this is an SAP-only process where they're using Evolve to be able to, and they're using the Digital Access API to give their business users a simple way of doing it, and they can do it very quickly. That's the reason that they chose to use Evolve for this, because it is a very, very simple and powerful tool for giving you that capability of developing forms that are business friendly. And finally, one of the other applications we see for the Digital Access API is using it in conjunction with an MDM hub, and specifically in conjunction with the EnterWorks MDM hub that we also offer through Precisely. So this is for supplier data management, where you've got lots of different data and it's really working through a lot of different systems. You're coordinating it through that EnterWorks MDM hub, and you're being able to manage it through a workflow that works through Evolve. So Evolve works with both EnterWorks and SAP in this case, and the Evolve form works with both. So the data that you're managing through that workflow in those forms is going to end up in both EnterWorks and it's going to end up in SAP. So really drives a lot of efficiencies there. Plus, you're able to bring in any other sort of data quality or data enhancement that you need to through something like our Spectrum On Demand product. So a lot of benefits there if you think about the integration of an MDM hub with your overall SAP ERP system. This is where the Digital Access API can drive great benefits, not only for SAP, but for many of your other systems that you're looking at, or many of your other systems of record, especially when it comes to that core master data that you rely on to be absolutely correct and accurate across multiple systems. So we've talked about the SAP Data API for moving data from other systems into SAP and in cases where it doesn't require enrichment. We've talked about the Digital Access API where other systems can kick off a workflow that ultimately ends up in data ending up in SAP. Now let's talk about third-party REST APIs and how we can integrate with other systems and use those APIs to further enhance your automation, your end-to-end automation solutions, if you will. The first example we're going to look at this is account address validation. So if you're creating a new account, one of the things you want to make sure of, especially if it's customer or vendor, is that the address is absolutely correct. And this is one where you're going to start and you're going to do some basic input in Evolve for here's the new vendor, here's their address, and you can send it out for address validations through something like our Precisely Spectrum Spatial. And it's going to come back and tell you, is this address correct? Or here's the correct address. Maybe you've got your zip +4 in the United States. Then you're going to go through and the rest of the workflow is exactly the same as it would be traditionally. So this is where you're looking for data validation, data correction, data enhancements that you may need. You may want to do geo-addressing with it. You may want to add other information about that location. So you may want to do some location intelligence around it. And you want to enhance all that through that third-party API or REST API assistance that we have. So then you're going to go through your workflow. You're going to validate your data at the end, and that's all going to end up with higher data quality in your SAP system. So you're going to make sure, and this is a great way to use outside sources to make sure your data is of the highest quality and it's the data that you need to go with that SAP record. Another example of our third-party REST API and Evolve driving enhancements is where you want to synchronize data between SAP S/4HANA and other sources. So data is getting created and managed in those other sources, and you want to make sure that that same data then gets posted into SAP correctly. If you're not dealing with an MDM hub, this can be a critical way to make sure you've got synchronized data across all of your different systems. And again, that third-party REST API support where those other systems are calling that third-party REST API can drive a lot of efficiencies and really drive a lot of higher data quality throughout all of your systems. And finally, I'm going to talk about one that's been a lot in the news lately when we talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, and how do they apply to automation and this end-to-end automation that we're talking about, and how do you use APIs to help enhance the ability and capabilities for artificial intelligence and machine learning. And in many ways, it kind of sits very similar to the way the address validation happens, where you're going to do something in Evolve and you're going to call, you're going to have an API call to, in this case, your machine learning, your Evolve AI framework, and it's going to enhance that data. So if one way to think about it is if you put in some basic information, and I'll go into this in more detail in a minute, but you put some basic information into a form, and your AI is going to look at that, and based on the model that you've trained over time or over using historical data, it's going to fill out the rest of that form and then run it through the workflow. So the workflow activity becomes much more of a review and approval process and less of a data entry exercise. But before we get into the specifics of that, I think we need to clarify what we're talking about when we talk about artificial intelligence, because it comes in lots of different flavors. The two core ones for us to think about are generative AI and predictive AI. Generative AI is the one that everybody's talked about for the last few months that became very hot all of a sudden, where you're talking about Bard and ChatGPT and DALL-E and all those other various things. And it really is designed based on these massive learning models. So I think Bard, a great example of that is, to my knowledge, Google effectively used as much of the internet as they could tap into to train Bard how to answer questions and generate new stuff based on everything that it could find on the internet. So they're trained it based on these large language or large learning models. And generative AI is really intended to create something new content, whether it's a photograph or music or an article. So a good example of generative AI is I could go out to ChatGPT and ask it, write me 1,000-word article on the benefits of generative AI for, let's just say, automation of complex data-intensive SAP processes. And in about 10 seconds, it will write me a really nice 1,000-word article. Quality can be a bit questionable at times, but that's what it's really intended to do. So it's going to generate new information based on a prompt. Predictive AI is the one that we see probably being more immediately impactful for automation. So predictive AI is in many ways your traditional machine learning model with a little more intelligence added to it. So it's designed really to make accurate predictions based on statistical algorithms that are trained using your own data. So this is one of the key things when you think about it. And one of the concerns around generative AI is to get it to work inside on our own processes often requires it to be trained on data from other people's information. And often our information can then be added to that training model and that learning model, which means other people then kind of have access to it. Predictive AI is just based on your data and your proprietary data, and everything can stay in-house. It doesn't have to go out. So you can train the model on your historical data, and then as you do other activities based on that model, it's going to tighten up the model over time. So it's a really, really powerful tool, and I'll talk a little bit more and give you examples of where we see it being highly applicable. But it's great for doing predictions around things like field values, routings, anything that happens within your organization for a process and for the data that you use. So we see predictive AI being the one that you're probably going to find in your automation much more quickly than predictive AI or than generative AI. So predictive AI, yes, you will see first before generative AI. And what does this look like? Well, let's think about a materials creation process. These things are highly complex. Materials tend to have hundreds of fields in some cases. It's often very manual. It's often, manual data entry, which is error prone and slow and difficult, and creates a lot of the problems we have internally. And so in order to fix that and avoid a lot of those problems, we create business rules. And business rules help us really provide guardrails for the people filling in the data, but they tend to be very static. And generating those business rules can be highly problematic. So let's just look at a couple of things around business rules that create some of those challenges. One is you have a heavy reliance on generating those around SMEs and implicit knowledge that you have in your organization. Now, this is one of the great challenges that actually the pandemic has created. I was talking to an economist a few weeks ago, and we were talking about just not only the number of people who died in the pandemic, but the significant number of people who took early retirement. There were about 5 million people in the United States alone who took early retirement during the pandemic. So what this meant was a lot of that implicit and internal knowledge that we had, and a lot of our longtime subject matter experts retired. They're no longer part of our organization. So generating business rules now becomes even more difficult. It's also one of the reasons that we're looking for technologies that are going to make our people more efficient and more effective, not necessarily replace them. Building business rules is a big challenge in that area. Then the other area is you often have to gain cross-functional alignment and understanding and agreement. And if you try to get 4 departments to agree on anything, it can take forever. We literally have customers who've taken over a year just to build the business rules around some of their automated processes. And this is where artificial intelligence can come in and really drive a lot of benefits to your organization. So what it can do for you is it can simplify the way those business rules are created. If you give it some historical data and train your model, it's going to start to build its own set of rules. And you can start by building a hard-coded set of basic rules for it, and then let it generate and determine what are the rules that should apply to different fields, different forms, different aspects of that automated process. And over time, those business rules get tighter and tighter and tighter and more effective and more efficient. And they apply across many more things. So you no longer have to worry about figuring out an edge case that happened once 7 months ago and the people who worked on it are no longer here, because the system is going to remember it, it's going to understand it. So what it means is you're able to put in some basic information, and what you get back is a mostly filled out form or a completely filled out form that then has confidence levels that are indicated. So if you think about, you may see, and we've done this with some of our proofs of concept where they're color coded. So let's say 95 to 100% confidence is green, 80 to 94% confidence is yellow, and anything below 80% confidence is red. So again, your review and approval process becomes just that. It's a review and approval process for a highly complex thing like materials. It's no longer a data entry exercise, it's a data review exercise. And when you're doing that data review, if you do have to do data entry to make corrections and things of that sort, you also then have built-in data quality rules, which have been generated by the system, to make sure that the data you're putting in is correct based on the model. Or you're training the model that is the correct data to put in. So extremely good way to improve your data quality, also build your business rules, and also be able to, instead of spending over a year building a set of hard-coded business rules, what you're able to do, again, is build a simple set of business rules, use historical data to train the model, and you can start. And over time, those confidence intervals become tighter and tighter and tighter. So instead of your green confidence level being 95 to 100%, it may be 98 to 100%. And your yellow is 95 to 97%. And anything that's not 95% confidence is red. And again, as those tighten up, your data quality gets higher and higher and higher through that artificial intelligence and machine learning integration with your process automation. So what does it give you? It gives you, again, improved data entry and decision making. So you're not having to figure this out. Much higher data quality, as we talked about. You've got data quality checks throughout that process that are built in through the machine learning algorithm. And through that artificial intelligence that's understanding and learning, yes, this should be this type of number or this type of form fill or field fill. And anything else is incorrect. And it can make sure that what is going in there is absolutely correct. You're reducing your hard-coded rules because it's got a dynamic set of rules that it's building depending on how you are changing and adjusting and making sure that the data that it is recommending in those fields is correct. So again, dynamic rules, and over time, if your rules change, it's going to change with you. And it's going to reduce the time to value for your solution. So you're not waiting a year and a half to develop those rules, as I mentioned earlier. You can launch almost immediately based on historical data and based on a small set of hard-coded rules. So it's a really, really good way to drive a lot of efficiencies into your system. And so this is just another way that API integration in your automation and in your automated processes can drive a lot of benefits to you. All right, so really quickly to wrap up, this has been a very high-level overview of what our REST APIs are capable of doing. So we've got the SAP Data API, we've got the Digital Access API, and we have that third-party API support. If you would like more information, a much deeper dive, somewhere, I'm not sure which side of the screen it is, in our resource center connected to this video, you should be able to find a demonstration that was put together by Sigrid Koch, who's one of our principal solutions engineers. And she does a really good job of giving you, again, a little bit of high level, but really taking a technical deep dive into how to implement these APIs that we've talked about today. So it's a really, really great way of getting the next level understanding of what we're able to do with these APIs and what your opportunities are when you're using Automate Evolve and you're using Automate Studio Manager to drive greater efficiencies where you have other systems that need to have data engaged with SAP processes. So highly recommend that demo as well. But now let's look at what we've talked about today and a little bit more on some things we didn't necessarily cover in depth that I know Sigrid covers there. So a couple of things we didn't talk about in depth on this, but just some other information around our REST API and data connection support. You get query control, you get lookup control, you've got participant resolvers, sorry. You can get drop-down menus, so you can have this happen in some of the drop-down menus. Great example of this is actually in that third-party support for address validation. We've seen some of that being applied quite well. You get a data connection adapter plugin, and you get some web service control. So there's a lot more information that you can find on precisely.com and through our support site. If you want really a lot more information about what these APIs can do. Like I said, this is a very high-level overview that I just went through. If you think about the Automate platform and what we've talked about overall for SAP processes and these complex data-intensive SAP processes that we have, we are talking about being able to improve your agility. You can pivot and move and change and address situations where you have a lot of disruption going on in your business. Automation is a great way to get there. The Precisely Automate platform, both Evolve, Studio, well, not both, whether it's Evolve, whether it's Studio, whether it's Automate Studio Manager, all of these can help you gain that agility in disruptive times. So it's a really great way to position yourself to be able to adapt when that happens. So you get that agility you want. We've talked in other situations about speed. So we often see people improving their process speeds by 90%. We've got a number of customers who've cut their time to market for new products by half. So there's a lot of speed that can be gained by automating your SAP in these SAP-centric processes. We talked about ways that you're going to improve your data quality through data validation, through some of those rules improvements, other ways that you're going to be able to drive greater data quality across the board. So we're talking initial data quality through automation. And again, Precisely has data quality tools that can help you clean up the data you already have in your system. Process visibility, it's an absolutely critical one, especially when you've got auditable processes and you need to be able to know what's happening, where and when, and be able to review it quickly. The Automate platform can deliver that for you. Business team focused. One of the things we've always been since our founding 20 years ago was we've been focused on helping business teams make an impact at scale. Giving them, simplifying the way they work with SAP, giving them business-friendly forms and user-friendly forms that they can fill out rather than having to learn the way that SAP does things, really can drive a lot of just performance at that business team level. Automation flexibility, we give you a lot of different ways to automate, not only using the APIs and the different systems, but whether you're looking at mass data processes that start in Excel, or whether you're looking at form and workflow, whether you need to do things in parallel, or whether you're looking to do things sequentially, lots of different flexibility in the way that you implement your automation for these SAP processes. Scalability, we work with many of the largest companies in the world. So we've been able to work across these very large organizations and help them scale their automation to multiple parts of the business and to multiple use cases in different areas, especially when you're talking about these processes that cross lots of different departments. And finally, we've got a proven track record. As I said, we've been automating SAP processes for 20 years. We've got lots and lots of extremely, thousands of happy customers around the world, and we are happy to show you examples and give you other use cases of what you can do and how you can take advantage of the capabilities that the Precisely Automate platform and the Precisely Automate portfolio gives you to be able to drive efficiencies through your entire SAP landscape. And hopefully now you have a much better sense of what the Precisely Automate platform can do for you. Like I said, this is just part of it. When we talk about the APIs, we have lots more information available for you. But as I mentioned, for those of you in the SAP world, you may not be familiar with Precisely. There's a good chance you are familiar with Windshuttle. And a little bit more about Precisely. As I mentioned at the top, Precisely is the leader in data integrity, which means we give you the accurate, consistent, and contextualized data you need to make confident business decisions. And that's really a critical thing to think about as our business environment becomes more and more complex every day. We do this for about 12,000 customers worldwide in over 100 countries. We are in 99 of the Fortune 100. And on any given day, we've got about 2,500 employees. Now, many of the leading brands in the world trust us with their data. And hopefully after you've heard this and seen this and checked us out in many other ways, you will trust us with your data. In addition to that, we have partnerships with many of the leading technology providers in the world. So there is a very good chance that somewhere in your environment and somewhere in your enterprise, Precisely can help drive greater efficiencies and just a lot of benefits across it, whether it's your data you're talking about, whether it's your SAP processes. We would love to be able to help you. And really what we'd love to be able to do is continue this conversation. You can find more information, as I've talked about throughout this, at precisely.com. If you look, especially in the solution section under SAP Process Automation, you'll find a lot more specifically on process automation, but we have a lot more there across the entire business. However, if you have a specific challenge or need or something that is really vexing you in the SAP area, and you really want to just sit down and have a conversation, give us a call. We are happy to sit down, talk to you, and really understand how it is that Precisely can help you find a solution to that problem. We're here to help, and we definitely want to be able to help you. And finally, I just want to thank you all for being here. I know your time is valuable, and we very much appreciate that you are here and that you chose to spend your time with us. And I hope everyone has a happy and healthy day. Thank you very much. Bye.